This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Palworld is a brand new open world survival, crafting, and monster taming game that has taken the world by storm. And with the game selling 15 million copies on Steam and 10 million copies on Xbox in just the span of 1 month, it's already established itself as a titan of an IP. The game allows you to traverse a beautiful open world inhabited by pals, animal-like creatures with all kinds of mystical powers and abilities. You can catch, train, and even ride your pals, and you can also shoot them. Yeah, the game is often referred to by both fans and detractors as Pokemon with guns due to the ability to grab a rifle or an AR and absolutely go to town on these adorable creatures. You can also force them to produce weapons and resources at your base until they go insane. And look, as hilarious as that is, most people would be able to push aside these odd gameplay elements as quirky, a little bit odd, but kind of endearing in its own bizarre way. That is, if it wasn't for Palworld's plagiarism problem. Today, let's take a deep dive into the problems of Palworld, from the game's rocky development history to its glaring flaws to the many and varied instances of plagiarism that it's been accused of. Buckle in, this is going to be a wild ride. Developed by Japanese game studio Pocketpair, the trailer for Palworld dropped in June of 2021, promising a vast world filled with magical creatures which you could ride, fly, and fight alongside, all while building up your home, tending to crops, and fishing. However, the trailer quickly went off the rails, showing vicious gun battles with realistic rifles, as well as tired and crying pals being forced to tirelessly work in gun factories. The trailer absolutely blew up, with tons of articles, YouTube videos, and of course quippy tweets following its release. There were of course a ton of jokes about this just being Pokemon with guns and forced labor, but there was just as much genuine excitement about the game and its promise. For years and years, Pokemon players had been begging Nintendo for an open world game, allowing players to explore the many regions of the Pokemon world and ride, fly, and swim on all of their favorite Pokemon. Finally, the game of their dreams was real. Sure, it didn't come from Nintendo, but that didn't really matter. This mixture of controversy, mockery, and excitement made Palworld's project all the more visible and all the more viral. By the time that the game was preparing to launch, there was a huge amount of hype around it, with eager gamers across the world waiting with bated breath to see if Palworld would live up to the hype of its admittedly rough around the edges trailer. The final product, which released in January of 2024, ended up being quite different. While the initial trailer made the game seem like a story-based monster-catching RPG with survival elements, the final game had a far more gritty and realistic style with no main story and a heavy emphasis on survival and crafting. The main gameplay loop of Palworld essentially boils down to capturing pals, running out of resources to catch said pals, advancing and building up your base so you can get more resources, and having to capture more new and powerful pals to level up enough to keep advancing and building up your base, etc. For example, many rare high-level pals can only be found around the volcano and on the snowy mountains. In order to safely travel there, you'll have to catch a flying pal and level up enough to craft a saddle for it. For some rarer pals, you'll need to be over level 30 to 40 to learn the recipe for their saddle. Then you'll need to craft heat and cold resistant armor, which again you'll need to level up to learn, and then you'll need to harvest the resources to craft. This means a lot of farming, crop harvesting, breeding, and ordering your pals around so they'll mine stone and wood for you. The game is a constant cycle of leveling up, investing skill points, improving your harvesting methods, making your base more efficient, and crafting new items and weapons, all so you can travel further and catch more advanced pals. Needless to say, it can get pretty grindy. But once you catch the pals, you can feed them, pet them, and even ride, fly, glide, and swim on them. There are over 100 pals to collect, ranging from adorable squirrel and cat creatures to giant flying dragons and terrifying shadowy fire creatures that attack on sight. The more rare that a pal is, the stronger, faster, and more powerful that they'll be, with your first few mounts being pretty slow and your late game stable being a bunch of lightning fast runners and flyers. The claims of Pokemon with guns are indeed correct. You can make all kinds of weapons, from clubs to bows and arrows to muskets and rifles, so you can shoot cartoon creatures to your heart's content. And you can also hilariously give your sweet innocent pal a gun too. You're also able to mount your pals mid-battle to control them and launch powerful attacks at opponents. You can either play through the open world solo, building your own bases and collecting pals to your heart's content, or you can play multiplayer with dedicated servers allowing many players to inhabit inhabit a world together as friends or foes. As for the story, well, there's not really much of a story. In the game's opening cutscene, you wake up on a beach and find a stone tablet which tells you that the towers are the key and the tree holds the truth. As you approach a plateau overlooking the island, you see huge glowing metallic structures dotting the landscape as well as a distant tree. The towers each contain a boss which you'll have to fight through to progress the story, or at least what little story is currently in the game. The development of Palworld was rocky to say the least, with the CEO and co-founder of the studio Pocketpair, Takura Mizobi, claiming that it's a miracle that the game exists at all. In a blog post written by the CEO about the game's development, quote, "The road to this point has been long. Looking back, I feel like I took a real detour. It's a series of unnecessary failures. I stumbled over and over again in places I shouldn't have stumbled over if I had known. I didn't know things that industry experts should know because we were a group of amateurs." And a group of amateurs they were indeed, with many of the employees having very little experience in their field of work. It took Takuro a whole month to make just one model when there were over 100 planned for the game. And when an experienced animator asked about the model's rigs, he was taken aback as he didn't even know what a rig was. The company's previous game, Craftopia, which we'll touch on later, was made entirely with purchasable Unity assets, so no designing, modeling, rigging, or animation was required, leaving the team with very little experience in that realm. Though initially planned as a small 4-person project, Palworld continued to grow in scope and ambition until Pocketpair was composed of 40 employees and the budget had ballooned past 1 billion yen. The company moved a part-time convenience store worker and junior high graduate who had made gun animations on YouTube to Tokyo to work on the game, and the creature designs were mostly done by a single graduate student. Quote, "She was a new graduate and had applied to nearly 100 companies but failed them all, and she is now drawing most of the characters in Palworld." The CEO described the file management system and the engine as a mess before they hired on more experienced project developers to help get the project back on track. When a veteran game developer offered to work on Palworld but only knew how to work in Unreal Engine, all of the code which had previously been made in Unity was scrapped, and the engine was ported over to Unreal. This perhaps would explain why the initial trailer looked a lot more simple and cartoony compared to the more realistic, atmospheric look of the final game. From the Palworld blog, quote, "We successfully migrated the engine from Unity to Unreal Engine 4. All existing code has been discarded. There was not a single person in the company who had experience with UE4. It was a huge risk, and it's almost unbelievable that with this many seemingly uncoordinated and inexperienced team members, Pocketpair was able to cobble together something of Palworld's scale. Still, despite the extremely messy early development, Palworld eventually got on track for release, and all of the team's hard work paid off in the end, with the game becoming one of the most popular and widely played games in the world with over 19 million players and counting as of today. But little did Pocketpair know that they were hopping out of the frying pan of their rocky development and into the fire as accusations would fly and whip up a firestorm of drama and controversy. But before we get into all that drama and controversy, let's talk about something a little bit more positive. Squarespace. Squarespace has thousands of unique and stunning website templates which you can then customize, update content, and add features to fit your needs. You can make any Squarespace template do whatever you want so your epic and amazing brand or idea or project stands out online. And on every device. Squarespace is a great solution for merch, whether you're a creator, a small business, or just someone who wants to sell silly shirts, or silly mugs, or silly keychains. Design your products, and production, shipping, and inventory are handled for you, saving you time and money. There are tons of incredible features for small businesses too. Physical, digital, whatever kind of products you sell, Squarespace has the tools that you need to start selling online, all while looking stunning, fun, and professional. You can also sell custom merch and create a passive income stream that engages your audience and scales your brand. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all of the amazing things that Squarespace can do for you. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/izzies to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. A huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and now let's jump back into things. So it goes without saying that Palworld borrows pretty heavily from Pokemon, and on the surface there's nothing wrong with that. Pokemon is a huge franchise and its influence is far-reaching. There are countless stories, games, and series that have taken the Pokemon formula and put their own unique spin on it. The Pokemon community itself is filled with artists and writers who love to make their own regions and dexes full of fake mon, so Pokemon fans have never shied away from taking creative liberty with the franchise and its ideas. A lot of the similarities in Palworld are arguably in the same vein, borrowing from the Pokemon formula while setting it apart in its own unique ways. The game is set in a world inhabited by powerful magical creatures called pals that you can catch and tame using spheres, which come in different designs all with different capturing power. The pals all have different elements. There's grass, ground, electric, water, fire, ice, dragon, and neutral, all of which are types found in Pokemon, and just like Pokemon, different elements are weak and strong against each other. Pals can learn and use moves, they have unique natures and stats, and you can even find rare lucky, aka shiny, pals with boosted stats, identifiable by the sparkles that twinkle around them. There's an evil team full of goons that dress the same and you have to defeat, as well as an organization that fights you because they think all pals should be free, which if you've played Pokemon Black and White, that should ring a bell. All of this is mostly fine. Yes, it's the Pokemon formula, but enough is chopped and changed to make it its own thing. It's set in a vast open world that you can traverse by riding, flying, and gliding on your pals. Combat isn't turn-based, it's real-time, and you can fight on or alongside your pal, controlling their moves and fighting on the ground, in the air, or even in the water. Or, you can bring along your AR-15 and provide backup. That's another thing, Palworld has guns. It's an emphatically less family-friendly franchise than Pokemon, owing to the fact that you can shoot up adorable creatures, send them to work in your ammo factory or rock mining facility, or use a butcher's knife to kill them and cook their sweet, sweet meat. Crafting is a key element, allowing you to make armor, weapons, tools, saddles, and bases which you can build and customize from the ground up. There's so much here that sets Palworld apart from its predecessors, so many fun, unique gameplay elements that borrow from the Pokemon formula and actually make it fun, which is more than you can say about actual Pokemon in recent years. I don't even think that's a hot take, I think we just all agree at this point that Pokemon has been trash in the last few years. But with all of that being said, there are some really egregious instances of Palworld just blatantly copying off the Pokemon franchise. It's unabashed, it's obvious, and it calls into question all of that supposed good-natured lifting off a franchise that heavily inspired them that we just talked about, because these instances make it feel more nefarious, more intentional. It makes it all feel more like actual stealing than just taking inspiration, allegedly, in my opinion, in Minecraft, etc. For example, the art style. The similarities in the PAL's designs are far more noticeable because the style of the 3D PAL models are so similar to the style of the 3D Pokemon models. One thing I also noticed was the UI. When using the PAL box, it brings up all of your stored PALs using a menu that's basically identical to the one found in Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is a game I played a lot for some reason. In Palworld discourse, the thing that's most often brought up is the similarities between creature designs. There are accusations that certain designs have been copied from Pokemon, with some models literally looking like direct rips. And while some of these models are very blatant and obvious in their theft, others I think have been quite overblown. I hate to see art stolen as much as the next guy, but a lot of people have seen these plagiarism claims and absolutely run with it, claiming that every single model is a blatant copy in some way. It's tough because on one hand you have Palworld detractors making pretty exaggerated stretches to claim that every single design is blatantly stolen, and on the other hand you have diehard Palworld dick riders burying their heads in the sand and completely dismissing any valid discussion about art theft. Personally, I fall somewhere in the middle, because everyone loves a centrist. I completely agree that there are so many Pokemon designs that it's basically impossible to design anything unrelated to any existing design in some way, especially as many of these creatures are based on similar animals, themes, and elements. But that isn't an excuse for the actual theft going on. There are some very glaring examples of theft here that aren't okay and need to be acknowledged. Now it would be completely silly and pointless to pull up the whole list of PALs and go through every single one and point out all the instances of plagiarism or the lack thereof. Yeah, that would be stupid. Okay, pull up the list. Number 1, Lamball. It bears a strong resemblance to Wooloo, not to the point where I'm willing to call it a complete carbon copy, but the cream and light brown colouring and the little face peeping out from the wool is suspiciously similar. Number 2, Cativa. Generic cat thing, it's whatever. Number 3, Chickapee. This is literally just a chicken. Number 4, Lifmunk. I've heard people say this is just a copy of Leafeon, Pachirisu, and or Emolga, and that's a huge stretch honestly, it's just a generic leaf squirrel. I actually really like the light green and red combo and the little cherries on its chest, it's very cute. 5, Foxbarks. People were comparing this one to Vulpix, which is kind of bonkers, they look nothing alike aside from the vague theme of Firefox. 6, Fwack. This one's called Fuck, and I have to respect it for that. 7, Sparkit. It's been compared to Pikachu and Raichu, which is a bit of a stretch, though it's worth noting that Sparkit and Raichu's tail is super similar. I really like the little lightning whiskers. 8, Tansy. As soon as I saw this one, my first thought was, hey, that looks like Pansage with a weed leaf on its head. Comparing the two though, they're actually not that similar at all. I can see why people have made the connection, but aside from being green leaf monkeys, there's not really anything there. 9, Ruby. It's a generic anime fox deer, one of the worst designs in my opinion. 10, Pengullet. Definitely a pretty strong similarity to Piplup, both in terms of colours and face shape and markings. Not egregious enough to be considered stealing since they're both basic penguin designs, but definitely noticeable. 11, King. Definitely one of the best designs that Palworld has to offer in terms of originality. 12, Jolthog. Uncomfortably similar to Shaman. Again, not egregious enough for me to go ahead and call it a rip, but the body shape and face are just undeniably similar. Jolthog Crest, which is the ice version of Jolthog, is less noticeably Shaman adjacent, I think because of the more muted grey fur colour. 13, Gumos. Amazing design. 14, Vixie. Another generic anime fox creature. 15, Hoocrites. It definitely borrows Honchcrow's built-in feather hat thing, but it's kind of whatever, it still stands on its own. 16, Teefant. Someone pointed out that this pal looks a lot like Munna, and now I can't unsee it with the body shape and the eyes. I'm on the fence about this one because it could be a coincidence, but it's similar enough that it's worth mentioning. 17, Depresso. This is another one where I saw it and immediately made a connection in my head, this time to Esper. The head and body shape, stance, flopped over ears, and the neutral mouth shape are all really similar. 18, Cremis. I've seen this one compared to Gigantamax Eevee, and yeah, that's spot on, they look really similar. 19, Daydream. It's fine. 20, Rushor. This is just a boar. 21, Nox. This one looks like someone's dark ghost evolution concept on DeviantArt. Definitely bears a pretty strong resemblance to the model of Eevee. 22, Fuddler. Super similar to Drillbur, they're both ground types and have an almost identical arm shape. 23, Killamari. This is another pal that copies Esper, except this time it's really obvious. The main body color is identical and the eyes are literally a one-to-one copy. It's also reminiscent of Inkay, which is a squid themed Pokemon with tendrils that hang down in a similar fashion. 24, Mao. Generic vaguely Egyptian themed cat, it's a bit on the nose but I do like the gold statue on the end of its tail. 25, Celeray. This one has been compared to Mantike and Palafin, and I guess if you squint it kinda looks like it takes vague inspiration from parts of both of them, but that's not plagiarism. I actually think this has a really strong design, not the most unique, but it's cute and fun for an early game pal. 26, Dire Howl. Super obvious instance of plagiarism. I get that there's only so many ways you can interpret wolf, but come on. From the markings to the ear, face, and body shape to the overall stance. Twitter user Biofrog made a post comparing the 3D models, and from these comparisons it's clear that something shady is going on. 27, Toko Toko. Another pretty blatant copy. The model itself is fine even though it looks like a deranged cereal mascot, but the colors and patterns are so clearly stolen from Natu and Xatu's designs. Those two Pokemon have such striking and intricate designs and colors that any attempt to lift from them is going to be immediately identifiable. It's actually kind of crazy that they tried this. 28, Floppy. I love the pink and light green with the orange flower accent. 29, Mozzarina. I actually really like Mozzarina because it's like a chill as fuck cow, but I do agree with the theory that the face was lifted from Snorlax and the teeth were flipped the other way. 30, Bristler. I don't like this design, it's not a copy or anything, it's just really average looking. 31, Gobfin. One of the best little guys in this game in my opinion. What a cool design. 32 Hang You. I haven't seen many people talk about this one, but personally it looks a lot like Chingling and Chimeco to me. I know the similarities aren't too stark, but the stripes and the body shape and the way it floats, they just give me the same vibe. Let me know if you guys agree or if you think that's a stretch. 33 Mossander. It's fine, it's basically just a panda. 34 Woolly Pop. This one's been compared to Alchemy a few times, and my hot take is that Pokemon doesn't own the concept of cute pink candy creature. 35 Caprity. Good design. 36 Malpaca. I hate this one so much. Not only is it just a really unappealing design with these dead eyes and weird gangly legs, but it's also just a ripoff of the Pokemon Flaffy. They're both sheep creatures with pink and blue accents in the exact same shades. 37 Eekthadere. I've seen this one compared to Xerneas. Again, Pokemon doesn't own the idea of deer with big antlers, and if you look closely the two are super different. 38 Nightwing. Super similar to Staraptor, just replace the black with navy. This one's really blatant in my opinion. 39 Ribbunny. Basically just a mashup of Pachirisu and Sylveon with the face and body of the former and the pastel palette and rounded ribbons and bows of the latter. A Frankenstein at worst and devoid of creativity at best. 40 Incineram. A dead ringer for Zoroark, especially with the body shape, colour palette, and the large plume of hair behind its back, which is tied up at the end. 41 Cinnamoth. Super simple design, but they make it work. 42 Arsox. It reminds me a lot of Terrakion, and I wonder if that Pokemon had any influence on this design. Either way, it looks fine. 43 Dumud. I couldn't put my finger on what this reminded me of until I figured out that it's a combination of Clodsire, Slowpoke, and Sobble. Again, plagiarism at worst and extremely derivative at best. 44 Cognito. One of my absolute favourite designs. It's clever, it's cool, it uses Plague Doctor imagery. What more could you want? They only come out at night and they look super spooky. 45 Leespunk. It's fine. 46 Loop Moon. Now this is a power where I understand the comparison to Zoroark. Exact same body shape, and it's super egregious when you compare the arm and leg shapes together. It basically looks like a one-to-one copy. The colours are also identical, using dark navy blue, muted red, and even bright turquoise for the eyes. 47 Galeclaw. Good design. 48 Robinquill. Okay, this is one of the worst ones. I was honestly flabbergasted when I saw this. I mean, do I even need to explain the similarities to Decidui? Look at how similar these are. They're both archers with bows and arrows. They share the exact same palette. They both have spiky green details around their heads, white and orange feathers, and orange eyes. If they had used the palette of Robinquill Terra, you know what? I probably wouldn't have noticed the similarities as much, but because for some unknown reason they decided to lift the exact same colors, it's very noticeable how blatant this one is. 49 Gorarat. This is just a monkey. Number 50 Beeguard. It's fine. 51 Elizabeth. I like this one because all of the other pals have cool animal names and this one is just named after a human woman. 52 Grintail. If you compare Grintail and Alolan Meowth, the face is exactly the same. 53 Swee. Good design. 54 Sweeper. Good design. 55 Chillet. People compare Chillet to Furret a lot, and aside from having long tube-shaped bodies, which is just kinda how ferrets look in general, I don't really see it. 56 Univolt. I've seen it compared to Zebstreaker. Again, Pokemon doesn't own the concept of Lightning Horse. This design is cool and stands on its own. I actually really love the colours too. 57 Foxicle. I haven't seen many people mention this one, but in my opinion it's stolen quite a few elements from Glaceon. It has the pale blue ice fox theme, the dark almond shaped eyes, and the big triangular ears flopping down. 58 Pyron. Good design. 59 Raindrix. Good design. 60 Rayhound. Ugly design, I'm sorry. I've seen comparisons between Rayhound and Lucario's faces, and I definitely kinda see it, but not enough to be completely sure that it's a carbon copy. 61 Kitsune. Good design. 62 Dazzy. Uncannily similar to Thundurus, they both float on clouds, share a purple and blue color palette, and have singular horns on their head. 63 Lunaris. Why does no one talk about how creepy this pal is? I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something really unsettling about it. Personally, I think this one is super similar to Mega Mewtwo Y with the exact same hand shape, the same large sort of detached hips and legs, and similar horns and head shape. 64 Dinosaur, one of the worst offenders by far. It has the head shape, eyes, and color palette of Meganium, the big flower head crown of Lilligant, and the body shape of Gudra right up to the curled tail. Unlike other pals that take certain elements from different Pokemon and create something unique, this just mashes a bunch of stolen parts together and calls it a day. 65 Serpent, good design. 66 Moraith, one of my absolute favorite designs. This guy is so cool. I take umbrage at it though, since it has giant flaming wings and you can ride it, but for some reason it's a ground mount, not a flying mount. Make it make sense. 67 Digtoise. It's being compared to Dreadnought, but aside from both being tortoises, there's no similarity there, and I actually like Digtoise's design a lot more. 68 Toonbat. Really cool design. 69 Lovander. I despise this one so much. This is by far my most hated pal. I'm gonna get into a whole rant about Lovander later, but right now we're talking designs, and all I have to say is that it's a blatant copy of Salazzle and it's ugly as fuck. Get this thing out of my sight. 70 Flambelle. Good design. 71 Vanworm. Generic fire worm / dragon / bird design. 72 Bushi. It's fine. 73 Beacon. It's fine. 74 Ragnarhawk. Cool design. 75 Catris. Good design. 76 Wixen. The similarities to Braixen are definitely there. 77 Verdash. Literally almost a one-to-one copy of Cinderace, from the sharp fur in the middle of the face, to the thick arm shape, to the puffy pants and the yellow fur around the bottom, to literally having the exact same leg shape as proven by this screenshot comparing the models. If Verdash wasn't traced or directly referenced off of Cinderace, I'll eat my hat. Also, it has the exact same ears as Leafeon. 78 Valet. This dude is literally called Valet. Cool design though. 79 Cybellix. Suspiciously similar to Frosmoth, both being snowy white moths with blue eyes, large fluffy antennae and eyelashes, a big poofy circle around their necks, and fractal patterns on their wings. The bodies are different, but the small similarities are too numerous to ignore. 80 Alphadran. I actually really like this design. It's been compared to Ampharos in terms of body shape, and I do see it, but I think there's enough differences to pretty confidently say this one stands on its own. 81 Kelpsy. Good design. 82 Azarobe. This is honestly the worst one, and on the surface you might be like, Izzy, what? It's not that bad, but let me explain. Twitter user Biofrog compared the models of Azarobe and Superior and discovered they have almost the exact same body and head shape. Even worse, the model of Primarina was brought in, and comparing the plume-like hair on both of these models, it's very clear that this has just been directly copied. Absolutely no doubt, every curve, even every little stray flick of hair is the exact same size and shape. This is by far one of the most damning examples, as it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that certain elements of PAL designs have been outright copied. 83 Cryolinks. Good design. 84 Blaze Howl. It's cool, but it also just kind of looks like somebody's edgy DeviantArt OC. 85 Relaxaurus. This is another one that just uses Gudra's body as heavy inspiration, again right down to the curled tail. Also has elements of Quagsire like the colouring, arms, and beady eyes, but that's less noticeable. 86 Broncherry. Okay, this is a fine design, but for some unknown reason the aqua version of Broncherry steals the colour palette of Aurorus and turns the PAL into a complete ripoff. The colours are like exactly the same, combined with the overall shape and design of the PAL. I wouldn't have even compared them with the original colours, but this recolor makes it so much more obvious. I don't understand why they would do this. 87 Petalia. It's fine. 88 Reptyro. It's fine. 89 King Packer. Not a fan of this design. 90 Mamorist. It's fine. 91 Wumpo. Has the exact same face as Tangrowth as well as the same sort of big round body shape. 92 Warsect. Very similar to Aggron, especially the large clawed arms, the overall body shape, and the head with the horns coming over the face and the lower jaw being detached. 93 Fenglip. This design weirds me out. It feels like the head and body were mismatched and meant for different pals, and it sort of just looks super clunky in general. It's also one of the more flagrant examples of design theft if you compare it with Cobalion. They share the exact same teal blue fur and light yellow horns with lines on them, as well as a fluffy tuft of white fur on their chest. 94, Fellbat. Pretty clearly lifted Darkrai's color palette. This is a recurring theme if you haven't noticed, designs that would otherwise be perfectly fine if not for the fact that the color palettes are one-to-one copies of official Pokemon. I don't know why they do this, honestly it's so obvious, just use like a random online color palette generator if you have to. 95, Quivin. 10 out of 10, top tier, favorite design. It's just a massive fluffy white angel dragon and it's awesome. No notes, I want this thing to live in my house and I want it to fly me to the grocery store. 96, Blazermutt. Another top tier design, it's a giant buff hell dog with emo eyeliner and a cute little horn for a nose. It doesn't get much better than this. 97, Hellzephyr. Good design. 98, Astagon. This is just an emo version of Mega Aggron. The body shapes are almost identical with large clawed feet, armor around the knees and torso, round orb-like shoulders, and large cannon-shaped arms with claws. The horned helmet with the eyes tucked under and the open mouth are also basically identical. 99, Menasting. This sucks because it's otherwise a really cool design, but Menasting's face is almost the exact same as Giratina's if you compare the two. 100, Anubis. I hate this design in general. I don't like its scary human hands or the fact that it's skin colored, but it's also just a bit of a ripoff of Lucario. Similar blue and black color palettes, body shapes and almost identical faces, ear shapes and weird little crest hood things behind them. 101, Jormuntide. This one's pretty obvious, it's Gyarados. I will say the structure of the face and many of the smaller details are changed to be more unique, but the round segmented body and the blue and yellow theme are the same. Additionally, Jormuntide Ignis, the fire version of Jormuntide, is bright red just like shiny Gyarados. 102, Suzaku. Good design. Number 103, Grisbolt. This guy is basically the mascot of Palworld, so he's front and center in a lot of marketing materials. I've heard comparisons to Electabuzz, which are pretty silly in my opinion, honestly, aside from sharing a generic yellow and black electricity theme, which everyone in the world has definitely used at some point. They're nothing alike, though the comparisons to Totoro are less silly. Seriously, this is just Totoro. I'm not crazy, am I? This is definitely just Totoro. Hey, at least Pocketpair is switching up which IP they're copying every once in a while, that's nice. 104, Lylene. Seems to be a hot pot of Mega Gardevoir and Lilligant, and potentially a little bit of Bellossom as well. 105, Phalaris. Its model is almost identical to Corviknight's down to the exact same shape of the wings, the head shape, the crest of feathers, and especially the claws, which are basically indistinguishable. 106, Zerk. This model is completely ripped from Garchomp. They have the exact same body shape, from the rounded shark-like head and small eyes to the large upper legs and clawed feet, not to mention the hunched over stance. 107, Shadowbeak. Shadowbeak's model looks super similar to Silvally, especially this clawed head crest and the overall shape of the body. The circle of arrows on Silvally's helmet has been resized, flipped, and moved to Shadowbeak's torso. Additionally, the Pal's description reads, quote, "Born from the depths of insanity, its very existence should not be. Having lost all genetic ties to other Pals, one wonders if it could even still be considered a Pal." Shadowbeak and Silvally are both legendaries who were synthetically created and have no ties to actual Pal/Pokemon DNA, making them dangerous and volatile. Quite a lot of similarities if you ask me. 108, Palladius. Bears a strong resemblance to the Knights of Paldea, Cerulege, and Armarouge. Specifically the way Cerulege's helmet covers its eyes, the dark blue color scheme, and the weapons for hands. Only difference is this guy's a centaur, which I actually think is really cool. 109, Necromus. Same exact deal, again bears more resemblance to Cerulege, but shares the black and red palette with Armarouge. 110, Frostallion. It's a real shame because when I first saw this one I actually really liked the design, but upon seeing comparisons between Frostallion and Suicune I completely see it. Their body shapes are similar, but the real smoking gun is the large crest on its forehead with a billow of long hair in the exact same shape as Suicune, not to mention the identical faces and eye colors. 111, Jet Dragon. This is a Jet Dragon Pal which bears many similarities to the Jet Dragon duo Latios and Latias, with similar arm and head shapes as well as you know, both being like if a Boeing was a dragon. And lastly, 112 Boltmane. This power was only shown in early gameplay footage as far as I'm aware, but it was removed from the game due to controversy. I'm sure you can probably tell why. I mean, it's literally just Luxray. Biofrog compared the models and, well, yup, it's literally just Luxray. Maybe this one was airing a little bit too close to lawsuit territory. Okay, sorry if this audio sounds way different than it did before. I'm recording this after the fact, after I recorded everything, but I found out about the existence of 2 other unreleased pals that I think are very much worth mentioning. For context, data miners found these pals in the files of the game. It's been speculated that they are planned for a future release, however, due to the fact that they have featured in previous trailers, and due to the fact that they very strongly resemble some pre-existing Pokemon, I personally think that they were originally going to be added to the game, but then were scrapped and decided not to be added to the final release. And also, it's worth noting that Boltmane was also found in the files and was not added to the final game. So these 3 kind of come as a trio. The first pal is Dragostrophe. Personally, I think this one looks very, very similar to Reshiram from Pokemon Black and White. It kind of looks like a cross between Reshiram and Zekrom. But especially Reshiram with the sort of pear-shaped body, the large thighs, and the clawed feet, as well as the kind of like fluffy, sharp dragon vibe. Worth noting, it's the 3rd pal, I think, that has the palette of Zoroark, with this like dark navy blue, dark red, and turquoise eyes. They honestly really need to switch up their color palettes. And the 2nd pal is known only as Dark Mutant and looks like this. Yeah, I'm sure just from looking at this pal you can tell which Pokemon this was based off of. Because it's just referred to as Dark Mutant and doesn't go by any other name, my personal theory is that this pal is a dark variant of Lunaris. As we've already discussed, Lunaris is basically a Mewtwo clone, and this one is just extremely blatant, especially with the big crest at the back of the head. So yeah, it makes sense to me personally that this was originally going to be Lunaris Noct, the dark version of Lunaris, before maybe it was scrapped because they thought it was a little bit too obvious. As I said, a lot of fans are theorizing that these pals are going to be added in a future update. Personally, I don't think so, especially as Dragostrophe actually features in one of the early trailers but didn't make it to the final game. So clearly the files and the character and the pal is there, they just chose not to add it. Personally, I think it would be kind of crazy if they decided to add these 3 extremely similar, blatant Pokemon adjacent pals to the game at this point. But I wouldn't put it past them. It's entirely possible that they will. I personally just don't think so. I think that they were scrapped. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. I just thought it was really interesting to note, and I really wanted to point out these similarities in these pals because I find it really interesting. Let's continue. Here's the list summed up in a tier maker tier list. At the top you have my personal favorite designs, ones that I think are unique, refreshing, and bring something new and fun to the table. Good and fine are self-explanatory, dubious is for all the pals who look suspiciously similar to Pokemon but not quite enough to straight up call it theft. Blatantly stolen is for pals which are complete Pokemon rips, this is just a real life animal is again self-explanatory, and Hell Tier is for Lovander. So clearly not every pal is a blatant copy, there are some genuinely great and fun designs in there, but at best many of the other designs are a Frankenstein hodgepodge of a bunch of pre-existing designs, and at worst they're just straight up art theft. So why are so many of the pals like this? Sure, when creating your own creature decks, it's going to be hard to create designs that are entirely divorced from any idea or design element that Pokemon has touched, because they've touched basically everything. Sorry, I didn't mean to phrase it that way. The point is, it's hard to create something that isn't going to be tied to a Pokemon design in one way or another, but there's clear evidence that several of these models have been directly copied, or at least very heavily influenced. Well, there are 2 main theories to explain this. The first is that development on Palworld, as we've previously discussed, was kind of messy. This stressful and disorganized environment likely led to artist crunch, which may have in turn led to corners being cut in the model department. As previously mentioned, the Twitter user BioFrog compared several Palworld models to official Pokemon models and found that in some instances they were pretty much identical. Not so identical that they were copy and pasted, but close enough that the artist likely traced over or built on top of the pre-existing Pokemon designs. See, from my very limited 3D modeling experience, and don't ask to see my work, it's awful, you can put sketches, photos, and even other 3D models under the model you're working on, so you can work off of a reference image or trace a sketch. And I think that may be what happened here. The artist just put a model or an image of a Pokemon underneath and modeled over it, leading to these near identical designs. And I want to make it very clear here that I'm not blaming any of the artists whatsoever, nor do I want anyone watching this video to go harass them. They're just employees of Pocketpair doing what the company asked them to do because that's their job, and they're likely doing it under pretty stressful, time-crunchy conditions. But as Blizzard designer Eric Covington wrote, to accidentally create a complex model mesh with so near exact proportions is practically impossible. To repeat that improbability throughout your roster doesn't pass the sniff test. Another senior game artist spoke anonymously to Video Games Chronicle on the topic and said, quote, "You cannot in any way accidentally get the same proportions on multiple models from another game without ripping the models, or at the very least tracing them meticulously first. The wireframe meshes look different, so they're not the same models, but it's so close that they may have been built over top of the Pokemon models and made a few changes so they weren't exactly the same." Now the second theory that we're going to cover is a bit contentious. I want to state from the outset that there's no tangible proof that Pocketpair used AI art generation software to generate any designs or design ideas for PALs, but there is some circumstantial evidence that has led people to theorize that they did. Pocketpair's previous game was called AI Art Imposter, a multiplayer party game where you play as an AI artist and have to generate pieces of art to a chosen theme, with one person being the imposter who doesn't know the theme. Basically, the game's entire premise is built off of AI art generation software and stolen art. Additionally, in late 2021, Takuro Mizobi wrote a tweet praising AI for being able to come up with convincing Pokemon designs, writing, "The AI has evolved so much that I can no longer tell which one is a Pokemon. Left, Pokemon-like monster generated by AI. Right, real Pokemon." The hilarity of that statement aside, since these all look like indiscernible garbage, many have used this tweet as proof that Pocketpair have used AI to generate ideas for their pals. This would explain why the pals are so Frankenstein together and share very similar color palettes, and it would also make sense since the single very inexperienced artist would have been under a lot of pressure to create 100 unique designs by themselves. Again, I want to make it clear that there's no tangible proof that Pocketpair has used AI for any of their designs, and even if they did, I highly doubt they would fess up to it, since that would mean a lot of legal trouble with the already very litigious Nintendo. So for now, it's just a theory. A game theory. But the dubious use of other properties, ideas, and themes doesn't stop with Pokemon, oh no. Palworld has drawn from multiple influences, so let's discuss. In the raging storm of Palworld discourse, Pokemon is often at the forefront. But what is usually left out is the fact that Palworld has borrowed liberally from many other high-profile games. This section isn't about accusing Palworld of stealing or plagiarizing from these games, you can make up your own mind on that, but it's more about giving context to the hodgepodge of ideas that Palworld is. I was surprised to find when I booted up the game that it played nothing like Pokemon and was actually far more similar to Ark Survival Evolved. For those who haven't played the game, count yourself lucky. Ark Survival Evolved is an open world survival game set on a vast island where you can explore, build shelters and bases, collect resources, craft, and of course tame and ride and fight along dinosaurs. Palworld is basically Ark with a Pokemon coat of paint, and take it from someone who has unfortunately played hundreds of hours of Ark. The premise of waking up on a strange lush island with giant glowing metallic structures is the same. The crafting system, from making tools to harvest resources to using points to increase your abilities and unlock new tiers of crafting items, to the physical placement and building of structures, to even the layout of the crafting menus is the exact same. Cold and heat damage, as well as having to level up enough to build armor that can protect from said elements, is the same. Ground, sea, and flying mounts are the same, as well as the mechanic where you have to craft saddles before you can ride certain species. The extremely slow and grindy progression of the games is almost identical, as are the settings that you can crank up in the game menu to make them actually playable. The map, the ability to spawn in new random locations after you die, and dropping all your loot upon death are also the same. The CEO of Pocketpair has openly admitted the heavy influence that the game had on Palworld, and though the games look very different, they play almost identically. Another game that Palworld draws from is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The intro cutscene has you waking up on a beach and finding a tablet which looks exactly like the Sheikah slate from Breath of the Wild. The font and UI are also very similar at points, especially when fighting a boss, with the boss's name and a small title underneath appearing at the top of the screen in a pretty similar font. There's also a bunch of little piano flourishes throughout the game which sound pretty familiar. Items and resources on the ground sparkle, you can climb any vertical surface using your stamina, and hang gliding plays a large role in traversing the map. These similarities may seem pretty superfluous, and maybe they are, but it is worth noting that in 2020, Pocketpair released a game called Craftopia, which was an extremely obvious clone of Breath of the Wild. From the colours and art style to the map and setting to the design of the main character to the combat and gliding and enemies, just look at these screenshots and tell me that these are just taking inspiration. Though the game has been in early access for over 3 years and seems to have been mostly abandoned, its existence makes the similarities between Breath of the Wild and Palworld a lot more interesting. Also, I have to mention it because I put it in the title of this section, but this game also literally just has the Erd tree from Elden Ring for some reason. I guess the devs saw the success of Elden Ring and their only takeaway was that gamers like big trees. In all seriousness, this is fine, it's a big tree, whatever. The only annoying thing about it is that I spent like 5 minutes flying across the ocean to get to the tree because the opening cutscene tells you that the tree holds the truth, only to be met with an invisible wall. I'm sure they're going to add story stuff here in a later update since the devs have stated the game is far from finished, but come on, at least tell me that the tree isn't finished before I make an epic mission all the way out there. Moving on. This section is dedicated entirely to pointing out the flaws of certain elements of Palworld. I'm adding the disclaimer here that the game is in early access, so many of these issues could be changed or fixed in the future, but I'm a whiner, so I'm gonna complain about them anyway. Number 1, tonal dissonance. The crossbows and guns and mounted turrets work in Ark because the dinosaurs are all big and realistic and scary, but in this game they all look like cute theme park mascots. Before you can craft spears or bows and arrows, you literally just have to go around clubbing adorable little lambs and chickens with your bare hands, or your bare club. Even the larger, more aggressive enemies are so colourful and cartoony that you can't help but feel horrible every time you kill them and their limp models ragdoll all over the ground. If they had made the weapons more silly and cartoony, I honestly think it would be fine, like give me a dart gun or a zappy laser blaster or some glowy magic arrows. The realistic guns and weapons just don't fit at all and give the game this weird violent aspect which is hard to shake. The other thing that a lot of people mention about the game is how you can force your pals to do slave labor, and while it looked way worse in the original trailer with the pals crying and suffering as they toil away, in the actual game it feels a lot less sinister. Most of the time all your pals will be doing is laying eggs, watering plants, and helping to build stuff, so it feels a bit more like a happy little farm than a mass production factory. However, it is worth noting that in the later game you can craft assembly lines, which feels distinctly more wrong, and your pals also have a sanity meter. If they work too hard or don't eat enough, they can literally go insane and also get super sick and injured, which again feels a lot more dark and disturbing than a game with this art style should be. Number 2, the edgy pal descriptions. Speaking of things that are dark and disturbing, do you guys remember all of those clickbait videos from back in the day that would be like top 10 scariest Pokédex entries? And they would like go on about how scary and spooky the Pokemon entries were if you looked closely at them. One of the worst things about Palworld, in my opinion, the thing that really gets under my skin, is that it takes this concept and applies it to every pal. I swear to God I haven't heard anyone else talking about how annoying this is. Every pal, whether it's big and scary or small and cute, has to have some dark, twisted element to their descriptions solely so people can make YouTube videos titled like Palworld is darker than you thought or top 10 pals you didn't know were hiding dark secrets. Here are just a few examples. Intelligent as a 5 to 7 year old human child. It makes a wonderful partner, but there have been more than a few cases where they've killed their master after learning to use weapons. It puts those it is interested in to sleep and shows them an endless stream of happy dreams. Those who fall under its spell are never to wake up until death takes them. A savage beast born of the abyss. Thou shalt not stand before the beast. Thou shalt not heed the beast. And then this is the beast in question. Its gigantic arms can rip apart even iron. As a particularly cruel form of execution, serious criminals will be strung up in a public square and a hangyu would tear the skin right from their bones. It calls forth lightning from the depths of hell. One who dies from Hellzephyr's inferno is sure to be sent to the underworld. It carries newborn pals to its nest and raises them as a surrogate parent. Once the baby pal has fattened up, it hunts them. It specifically targets baby pals, taking them back to its territory. One can only imagine the profound despair of the parent pal whose child has been taken away. On nights where the aurora is visible, it looks up towards the sky and begins to howl a beautiful song. This does, however, leave it vulnerable to attacks from enemies. It can control those who carelessly stare into its eyes. Those seen with a Lunaris are in its mind, simply under its control. Attacking from the shadows, this pal traps its prey within its cloak-like wings. It's probably best not to know what happens within them or why the inside of its wings are stained red. Being made of pure energy, its insides are completely hollow. This pal crams still living prey into its hollow body where it absorbs them. Hellish screams of pain can often be heard coming from inside this pal. So many of them are like this, we get it. This isn't your average monster catching game for dumb babies. This is dark and twisted and fucked up, but come on, at least try to be a little less on the nose about it. Giving all of your goofy, silly cartoon fantasy creatures super dark and edgy descriptions doesn't make them interesting, nor does it constitute lore. I'm just gonna say it. I hate to say it, but I'm gonna say it. It's cringe. Number 3, the weird plot, ? Again, this game is in early access, so this could very much change in the future, but at the moment the game toes this weird line of having a plot but also having no plot at all. You wake up and the totally not Sheikah slate tells you that the towers are the key, and inside the towers there are boss battles with random anime characters. The plot is only ever vaguely explained in journal entries that are scattered throughout the world, with each journal belonging to one of the tower bosses. The only entry that comes close to explaining what the towers are, or what the overarching story of the game is, or what the quote-unquote secrets and truths that the game touts is this one from the first boss you fight, Zoe Rain. Quote, "I've started to wonder, why am I guarding this big tower again? I always thought it was obvious since father also used to do this, but now that I think about it, I have no idea why. From what I've heard about it, they say there's a legend passed down on this island. They said this tower is somehow related to that legend and that it has some big great power. What kind of power, I wonder? Even if that's true, why does this power have to be protected? Anyway, even though I don't really know why, I'm always here protecting this tower. There are other towers around the island and they say people like me guard them all." Oh, you thought the journal entry was actually going to explain anything? No, that's it. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that they're going to add a lot more story elements later on in development, but everything here is so hilariously vague that I can't imagine it being anything other than extremely generic. Also, side note, one of the bosses is like a drug lord and his entries are all about him feeding his pal cocaine, which is the only good plotline I've read so far. 4, it looks like a Unity game. And to be clear, I'm not talking about the quality of the graphics. On high settings the game looks absolutely beautiful, but what I'm talking about is the actual art style. It falls into this weird uncanny valley of stylization, somewhere between the gritty realistic style of Ark and the soft, almost painterly style of Breath of the Wild. The combination of the semi-realistic world and setting, hyper-realistic weapons, bright goofy cartoon monsters, and half man, half anime character models make it look like an odd Unity asset flip. In the first trailer that was released, which admittedly showed a very early version of the game, the art style was completely different. The world was brighter and more vibrant, looking a lot more cartoony and cel-shaded, which fit in with the style of the PALs way more. I know that the realistic Unreal Engine game aesthetic is in right now, but this early version looked a lot more cohesive and visually appealing, at least in my opinion. Number 5, Lovander. This is my Grinch canon event. This absolute creature is what made my heart shrink 2 sizes too small. And now I can't understand the beauty of Christmas or love anymore. Putting aside the whole Salazzle thing, which is bad enough, the main reason I hate this PAL so much is that it's clearly furry Rule 34, whoa OMG, it's a sexy lizard bait. Its design is all curvy, it has bedroom eyes, and they gave the lizard a Its description reads, quote, "Seeking a night of love, it's always chasing someone around. At first it only showed interest in other pals, but in recent years even humans have become the target of its debauchery. And its number in the pal deck is 69, get it? It's the sex number." Lovander is so blatantly just bait for clickbait YouTubers who are addicted to furry images, and the hilarious part is that absolutely all of them have taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. I mean, seriously guys, come on, what are we doing here? Its design is also just horrendous. The first time I saw this thing in the game, I recoiled. In summary, this thing makes me hate the world, and if you like it, your browser history needs to be checked. I'm kidding, you can like whatever you like. This is just a YouTube video. The public reaction to this absolute garbage fire of discourse has been divided, to say the least. It's frustrating to see vehement detractors spreading unfounded rumors about Palworld using AI and even harassing the artists. And it's just as frustrating to see hardcore Palworld white knights in complete denial about there being any issues with the game. Why these people are so insistent on defending its honor to the death by completely ignoring any issues that it might have, when in reality it's a very flawed game, is honestly beyond me. You don't need to dick ride so hard for a game that's been out for like a month. Enjoy a game, play it, I don't know, I'm not your dad, but at least be critical of the media that you're consuming. And it does really suck that there are so many dubious elements to the game because there's so much to love in there. I absolutely love just being able to catch, tame, and ride around on cool monsters in a big open world. I especially love being able to fly. This is what Pokemon fans have been asking for years, and finally there's a game that actually innovates and allows for that total freedom. I like that pals have different abilities. Some are nocturnal and don't need to sleep, so they'll work through the night. Others can double or triple jump. They'll give you additional stat boosts or more inventory space while they're in your party. Others will make you immune to hot or cold weather while riding them. Really unique, inventive stuff that makes it super fun to plan out your party. I like that eggs often spawn in rocky locations or along coasts, and I like how you can hatch and breed rare pals early on with enough patience and research. And I think some of the designs are brilliant. Quivern is just a giant fluffy angel dragon. It's so simple, but it's beautiful. Moraith is an awesome dark type design, this shadowy, fiery, nightmarish lion creature with a hollow mask and stingers for feet. Corknado is just a creepy plague doctor bird. That's epic. This is all awesome stuff, which makes it so much more frustrating that the game is bogged down with so many issues and so much controversy. Did I have fun playing Palworld? Yeah, actually, I found it really fun and engaging. The gameplay loop keeps you interested in wanting to build up your party and your base and explore the world. But does the game have huge flaws that need to be addressed? Yes, absolutely. I love the idea of Palworld, but it's wrapped up in so many issues, so many shady business practices, and so many instances of art theft that it makes it hard to fully enjoy. So the big question is, what does the future of Palworld look like? Well, for one, I think it means seeing bootleg Pal plushes everywhere you go for the rest of your life. While a lot of people are insisting that Palworld is going to send Nintendo into a panic and push them to finally put out a good Pokemon game, I highly doubt it. As of literally the morning that I'm recording this video, the trailer for Pokemon Legends ZA just released, and while I'd like to think that this is going to be Pokemon's big open world comeback, my hopes aren't particularly high. It would be nice, but if we learned anything over the past few years, it's that Nintendo makes bank off of extremely media Pokemon games, so you know, I doubt that'll change. In terms of Palworld itself, there are plans to greatly expand the game, adding more areas, story elements, and features, and I'd be excited for that, that if Ark didn't exist, because what I fear will happen is exactly what happened to Ark. It launched in early access with grand ambitions, experienced huge early success, made a ton of money, and then never optimized or fixed any problems in their game. Instead, pumping out paid DLC after paid DLC, meanwhile the base game was still unfinished and broken. Additionally, Craftopia, the aforementioned Breath of the Wild clone made by the same studio, has been in early access for over 3 years and according to players is still plagued with problems and missing features, which doesn't exactly fill me with confidence. The unfortunate reality is, if a studio strikes gold with a game like this, especially on the massive scale that Palworld has, they're kind of set. That's their cash cow. Whether Pocketpair decides to milk it for all it's worth or actually invest time and dedication into making it a great and most importantly unique game, well, only time will tell. Thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Leave your comments for me. I'm very curious to hear. I'm really curious to hear from people who have criticisms, people who have defenses of the game. I know there's going to be a lot of people who very much disagree with me. That's okay. I'm very interested in seeing any sort of discussion about this game. I think it's a really, really interesting case. I haven't seen a game on this scale, actually just generally on the scale for a while, but on the scale that is copying, I don't want to say copying blatantly, but it's taking so many different things from so many different games in quite an obvious way. You know, people have been making very frequent comparisons. You know, basically I haven't seen like a Pokemon-like game like this on the scale that really rivals Nintendo. I'm very, very curious to see what you guys have to say about it, and I'm very curious to see what the future of the game looks like. Like I said, my hopes aren't necessarily the highest, but I could absolutely be proven wrong, and it'll be interesting to see if I am. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you have any suggestions for future videos you want to see, definitely let me know in the comments. Thank you to my patrons, thank you to the sponsor of this video, thank you guys so much, I really, really appreciate it, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye! A huge thank you to my Garfield overlords over on Patreon: Sheriff Whiskey, Xavier Araujo, Crip Gunderson, Simon, Sophie H, Katrina Likes 5e Stuff, Oliver Brains, Thy Heavenly, Hazy, Zoe Miles, Dozo Blint, Matt LRJ, Leanne O, A Riddle Wrapped in Enigma Hidden by a Question Mark, Michelle Olsen, Joe Bradshaw, Astrian Vortex, Chicory, Helm Hamburger Hand, Jar the Bar, Jet Secret, Fitzy, Jesse Chisholm, Dana Homegardner, Charlie B, Lee XX, Blue Mayfeld, and Doug. Thank you guys so much for supporting me, it means the world. If you want to join these guys over on Patreon, the link will be in the description. And yes, thank you so much, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!